All right, I guess we'll go ahead and start. And we have Mr. Stanton Friedman back, who's going, yay, let's hear it. Who's come from Canada to be here with us.
Would you like one?
And now he'll be talking about the new view of the cosmos. So ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Stanton Friedman.
I think that's the shortest introduction I've ever had. What time is it? So how long do I have? An hour and 10 minutes?
Not long enough.
Thank you for coming out today. I'm sure there are other things to do in Del Rio. I couldn't resist it. I've been at this a long time. I gave my first lecture in 1967, and 700 plus lectures have gone by, and a lot of things have changed in the world. One would hope that some of that change would take place in our attitude about ourselves, we Earthlings, and especially the attitude of some of the intellectual giants of our time, the astronomers, who think they're experts on the universe, and who have uniformly, mostly, been anti-UFO. I suppose they expect that aliens would land at a meeting of the American Astronomical Society and they would get personal introductions to the aliens, proving how important they are in the larger scheme of things. Well, one of the things that's changed during my lifetime, half-lifetime of lecturing, is our recognition of what the cosmos is really like as opposed to the way we would like to think it was. The popular mythology is that, there's one solar system, one planet that's inhabited, that's where the smarts are, and everything we do is the best in the universe because there ain't nobody else doing anything. We have, hopefully, some of us at least, come to realize that that's nonsense. I mean, yes, there are people like Pat Robertson who have publicly stated that all the intelligent life in the universe lives on Earth. That makes it easy. On the other hand, the SETI people, and everybody knows that I think SETI, which is supposed to mean search for extraterrestrial intelligence, really means silly effort to investigate. Well, it's based on a whole bunch of silliness. There's no evidence anybody's coming here. Of course, if you look at their books, which I do, they won't look at mine, but I look at theirs, they won't look at the evidence. 5 large-scale scientific studies, it's hard to find them even mentioned. Secondly, they assume that for some strange reason, somebody out there is sending radio signals using technology appropriate to our level of technology. Now, are we very advanced when it comes to radio signals? First long-distance signal, 1901. That's not very long ago. The planet's over 4 billion years old, after all. Why would anybody use that old technology? I don't use the slide rule anymore. I got to be careful when I say that. I did that at the University of Detroit, a couple of classes of students, and I was saying progress comes from doing things differently in an unpredictable way. And I said, when I started work in industry, I was using a slide rule. I don't use one anymore. And I looked around the class, no reaction at all. So I bit the bullet. Any of you know what a slide rule is? Not one. Not one. Boy, did that make me feel old. But you get the point. Progress comes along. Things change. There wasn't any internet. It's hard to believe. When I was out looking for people connected with Roswell, Bill Moore and I spent a tremendous amount of money making phone calls. There was no internet. So, the first place we have, why would anybody use such a primitive device as a radio signal? Just because it's our most advanced technology. Secondly, why would anybody send a signal this way? Anybody out there? Is that the way we act? Do airlines send planes off? Hey, go find someplace interesting to fly to. Most of them have schedules. You know, they meet a need. But aliens, of course, have nothing better to do to sit back and say, well, we can't go anywhere, because the SETI people think nobody's going anywhere. Let's send a signal and see if we get a response. They got nothing better to do. That's pretty silly. Now, Frank Drake has once stated, and he's one of my choices of who in the SETI community is really on the inside. You may not know it, but Frank spent 3 years in the Navy doing advanced technology work for the Navy, anti-missile stuff, all that kind of stuff, and had a very high-level security clearance. Nobody ever talks about that. And he worked under Dr. Donald Menzel at Harvard when he got his PhD, and Menzel was in the middle of MJ-12, world-class expert on cryptography, mind you, and many other things. But anyway, Frank has stated once that there might be as many as 8,000 places in the galaxy that could be communicating to us. 8,000. There's, give or take, 100, 200 billion stars in the galaxy. And he thinks there might be as many as 8,000 interesting places. The Kepler satellite, which I'm a great admirer of, it's stopped working for the moment, but at least here's this little satellite that goes out and back, out and back. It looks at an area of the sky as big as my fist at arm's length. It's got to be very careful not to look at the sun and do other things like that. And they're now estimating that there's probably 1 planet per star on the average in the galaxy. Some would have 5, some would have none, but about 1. So rather than Frank's 8,000, a better number might be 8 billion. And they got nothing better to do than listen to us? Of course, they would say, well, you're saying they're coming here. Why would anybody come here? After all, we don't have a lot of astronomers here. There'd be no other reason for traveling, would there be, than just talk to the smart people on the planet? Pardon me. No. The point is that it's a very busy place, the galaxy. There are 1,000 stars within 54 light years of here. That's just down the street. I talked in my earlier lecture about Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 Reticuli, the stars that come out of the Betty and Barney Hill case. Those 2 stars, unlike us out in the boondocks, there's not another star nearby until you get 4.3 light years away. For Zeta Reticulans, there's a similar star, an eighth of a light year away, 30 times closer. You can see the other star all day long. That would give you pause. And you certainly have far more incentive to go somewhere if you had a next door neighbor. They don't consider that. And so I look around and I recognize that people are interested in UFOs. I hear very few people saying, oh, there can't be anybody else out there. What I hear is exactly the opposite. Surely there's got to be others out there. Whether we understand how they behave, whether we think we're so important that they must be contacting us. Remember, they can't travel anywhere. That's one of the basic rules of the SETI community. Ain't nobody coming here. First of all, because you can't get here from there. And I gave you a little glimmer in my earlier lecture about nuclear fission, nuclear fusion, nuclear power plants for space. And I still get people thinking they're going to use chemical rockets. That would be like saying the Navy thought about nuclear submarines, but why bother? We're still using diesels. That's ridiculous. How many of you have cell phones? Almost everybody. I'm not one of them. But you get the point. Times have changed. Times have changed a great deal. And our concerns seem to be about preserving our importance rather than taking a real look at what's going on. Now, in my book, Flying Saucers and Signs, I give, 20 reasons for coming to planet Earth. They're being punished. Spend 2 weeks on Earth. That's punishment to last a lifetime. We're somebody's colony. Penal colony, of course. They dumped all the bad boys and girls here, and that's why we're so nasty to each other. Well, Australia got started by convicts. And I got a kick out of when I was down there how proud they are of their convict heritage. You know, there are different reasons for moving around. I wonder how many of you are aware that the Earth is the densest planet in the solar system. I don't mean the people here, it's probably true too, but a cubic meter of Earth weighs more than a cubic meter of any other planet in the solar system. To which the normal response is, Stan, who cares? What difference does it make? Well, the denser the planet, the more the heavy metals you're going to find. And heavy metals are relatively rare. Uranium is a very dense metal. You know, we used to talk when I was growing up, heavy as lead, light as balsa wood, heavy as lead, you know. Well, osmium is twice the density of lead. Twice as heavy. Uranium is way up there, almost twice as heavy. You know what uranium was used for 100 years ago? Yellow glazing material on dining room plates. That's illegal now. Uranium's a little radioactive, so. But we didn't know that there were other uses. The Navy, the nuclear Navy, almost all the equipment close to the reactor is made of alloys of zirconium because it's got good nuclear properties and good high temperature properties and so forth. Nobody was using zirconium for anything 100 years ago, but it's here. There are diamonds coming out of Africa into the ocean. It may be that somebody is mining those diamonds. We're using underwater to hide our nuclear submarines with nuclear-tipped missiles so that we can retaliate if the Russians drop a bomb on us. They won't know where the submarines are, so we'll clobber them. But there are all kinds of other minerals at the bottom of the ocean. We're not mining them. The aliens may. There's over 1,000 cases on record of saucers going into or out of the water. We have built an electromagnetic submarine. Seawater is an electrically conducting fluid. I talk about in the atmosphere using magnetoaerodynamics. Ionize the air, make it an electrically conducting fluid. You can control lift, drag, heating, sonic boom production, radar profile, all those good things. Nobody talking about doing that. But there used to be a television program, I can't remember the name of it, an object going in, operating in the atmosphere and then into the water. Not so far out. We need to understand that we haven't been around very long, that we know about, that we're not so smart. If we were, why are we spending $1 trillion this year on things military? I'm not anti the servicemen who are here, incidentally. We owe them a great deal. But it's the politicians that I'm angry at, who can't find better ways of solving problems than waving nuclear weapons at each other. Thank you. I mean, I'm a nuclear guy. I think nuclear is great for all kinds of things. But surely we can do something better than threatening the future of our children with things nuclear. Going to the stars might be one of those things. You know, all our deep space probes use, many of them anyway, radioisotope thermoelectric generators. Little things this big. And they run for 30 years, 40 years. Use a little bit of plutonium-238, which is not weapons-grade material. The Cassini spacecraft is out at Saturn, and it's been there for years. We got it there by being smart, not more powerful. We sent it toward Venus, which is closer to the sun. It gave it a free kick, came back toward Earth. Gravity did its job when it went by. Sent it off toward Jupiter, another little gravitational freebie. And then off toward Saturn. All because that little device can produce energy for ages and ages. That's a good use of things nuclear. But if we've already thought of it, don't we think other people have? Let's hope we do. So, we need to look at the cosmos, not from the viewpoint of, look how smart we are, look what we've done. Look how much more there is to learn. And if we have already sent out a Kepler a few years back, what makes you think that other civilizations didn't send out their Keplers 1,000 years ago? A local neighborhood, library, Earth, nice place to visit, wouldn't want to live there, a bunch of idiots down there. Everything we've learned, somebody else would have learned a long time ago. All the stuff that I, as a nuclear guy, am interested in. The neutron wasn't even discovered until 1932. X-rays were called a hoax when they were first announced. Less than 115 years ago. 116 now, maybe. We are novices. We're just getting our feet wet. And we don't think anybody beat us to all these things we've discovered. And remember, most of our great discoveries have been about things you can't see. Neutrons, protons, X-rays, gamma rays, DNA. Can't see any of those things. There's more to the universe than what we can see easily at this point in time. I should think of some more reasons for coming here. Nice place to visit, Gas, food, lodging, next exit. But I think there's one overwhelming reason for aliens to be concerned about us and anybody else going through the transition from being non-nuclear to knowing that the major source of energy in the universe is nuclear fusion. Whether we like it or not is beside the point. Why does fusion matter? Because it gives you the means to annihilate your neighbors, and it gives you the means to get to your neighbors. We couldn't conceive of any way of doing that. Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson, on a Peter Jennings mockumentary about UFOs, back in 2005, I guess it was, said that our fastest craft would take 70,000 years to get to the nearest star. Scientists like to get their data sooner than that. He didn't bother to point out that it doesn't have a propulsion system on it. It's coasting. You're going to tell me if you throw a bottle in the ocean, it's going to tell you how long it crosses the ocean? Or put a balloon in the air, and that tells you how long it crosses the ocean that way? That's ridiculous. To give you some idea of how badly off you can be if you make the wrong assumptions because you haven't done your homework, Dr. Campbell, Canadian astronomer, back in 1941, science fiction writers were talking about sending a man to the moon. And he said, you know, that's really ridiculous. I will show you. He published a scientific paper in which he looked into the question of how much would a rocket able to get a man to the moon and back would have to weigh at launch. Pages of equations, bottom line. It would have to weigh 1 million tons. And even for me, that's too big. Is it reasonable? Totally irrational. He made every possible stupid assumption he could have made. Probably unknowingly. Didn't know how ignorant he was. He assumed a single-stage rocket. You know, all our deep space probes use multi-stage rockets. When you get rid of the fuel, throw away the can. Why should you have to accelerate it? And first and second and third stage? That's what we do. And that's been known for 20 years before Dr. Campbell. He assumed a limit of 1g acceleration. And people toss around that 1g, 10g's, whatever, usually without knowing what they're talking about. Our astronauts routinely take 5g's. The faster you get to orbit, the less energy it takes. So you want to go for the max. And I have a little game I play on some campuses. I talk to student groups, you know, physics colloquium. Talk about things that I know they don't know anything about. And then I ask a casual question. What's the numerical value of 1g? Force of gravity at the surface of the Earth. 9.8 meters per second squared. Everybody shouts, all the students know that number. And I say, how do you relate that to a Corvette? And they look at me like I'm talking Swahili. Well, 1g, a better unit, is 21 miles per hour per second. So if you're accelerating a car at 1g, at the end of 3 seconds, it's going 3 times 21, 63 miles an hour. And that's a pretty hot car if you've got any car buffs out there. You know, usually it takes 4, 5, 6 seconds to get to 60 miles an hour. So I then ask, what's the speed of light? 300,000 kilometers a second. They all know that. How do you relate that to the real world? They have no idea. That's 670 million miles an hour. Then the question, how long does it take at 1g to get to the speed of light? Multiple choice question, 1,000 years, 100 years, 10 years, or 1. How many think it's 1,000? And then I go through this. How many think it's 100? 10, 1. Here are a lot of professors saying 1,000 or 100. The right answer is 1. At 1 G, it takes 1 year to get to the speed of light. Not such a long time. At 2 Gs, which we can stand, well, how much can we stand anyway? It depends. You may have noticed that the astronauts go up into space on their back. Forces back to front, not foot to head, not through your ankles and your knees and your joints and all that sort of stuff. Why? Because we can handle a lot more acceleration back to front. A trained pilot can perform a tracking task while being accelerated at 14 Gs for 2 minutes. That's an acceleration of 300 miles per hour per second. But at the end of 2 minutes, you're going 36,000 miles an hour and you're long since out of sight and off the earth. That's measured values. You can actually stand 30 Gs for 1 second. 0 to 600 miles an hour in 1 second without damage, properly done. You're not walking around smoking a cigar, you've got your seatbelt and all the rest. There are limitations on all these sorts of things. Dr. Stapp, when he was in a rocket sled, got a little faster than he was supposed to get, and he slowed down a little more quickly. 43 Gs he took to slow down in less than a second. Less than a minute. Less than a second, yeah. And he lived to tell a tale. His eyeballs hurt like heck for a while, but he lived to be in his 80s or 90s. You gotta look at these things carefully, not jump to conclusions. Many people want half an Einstein. Speed of light's the limit. Oh, don't tell anybody that he also said as you get close to the speed of light, time slows down for things moving that fast. And how much depends on how fast you go. But it makes a difference when you're going out there. Time slows down for things moving fast. And the particles in that big accelerator in Europe, they go 99.99999% of the speed of light. That's a part of the world that we know something about. We didn't 100 years ago. We're learning. And so how do you go from it weighing a million tons to 3,000 tons, which is what the Saturn V weighed at launch? You get smart. You talk to people who know something about the field. The SETI cultists, as I call them, don't seem to know anything about deep space travel. Anyway, let's get on with the show. Well, I get a kick out of these two guys. Lee Spiegel's an old friend. He arranged the UFO hearings before the United Nations. Chase Brandon is a CIA agent. And when I first heard about this story, I said, oh, you gotta be kidding. The guy who made the movie, UFOs Are Real, and I'm in it, and Travis is in it, and so forth, is Brandon Chase. And I thought, somebody's pulling my leg here. This is kind of silly. Well, there is a real Chase Brandon, and he does work for the CIA, and he's an authority on the CIA that gets used by people making movies so they don't put their foot in it and so forth. So I thought it was just a kick. I checked, and there really is a Chase Brandon. You got to check everything. Okay. Some ways in which they've been wrong. You realize the big battle was how big is the universe, besides how old? There's Mr. Hubble. You've heard of the Hubble Space Telescope? There was a huge meeting of physicists Many were convinced that there was one galaxy, period, end of report. Hubble did a lot of observations, smart guy. There are galaxies all over the place out there. There's a big difference between 1 and 100 billion. I mean, if you're going to be wrong, I guess you should be wrong in a big way. We didn't figure out what produces the energy in the stars until 1938. But we didn't duplicate it in a big way until the first H-bomb in 1952. That's not very long ago. Somebody a little more advanced than we are probably figured that out no more than 1 million years ago. I worked on a study of fusion propulsion for deep space travel back in 1962. Of course, we don't have the money to do it. All these things cost money. Lots of money. And I'm not saying we should spend it. Why should we curse the neighborhood with us? Primitive society, major activity is tribal warfare. Look around a little bit. Everybody knows about fusion. Who's a little older than us. Less than 100 years older, and consider we've been around for, the planet's been around for over 4 billion years, that's a lot of people. There's stars out there that are 10 billion years old. I showed this earlier, just different fusion reactions, but the idea is to give you the concept that if you strike a match to produce a little energy, we're talking about a few electron volts involved in the energy reactions. Fusion reactions involve, oops, sorry. That was an inopportune moment, I suppose. This M is million electron volts. So when you play with fusion, you're not playing with a little more power than chemical rockets. We're talking billions more. $10 million times as much energy per pound is in chemical combustion. That's what fusion involves. 10 million times. So it's not a little better way of doing certain things, it's a heck of a lot better way of doing certain things. Like deep space propulsion. We were a little bit off. So maybe 10 billion planets in the galaxy instead of 8,000. That's being off. And that changes everything. It means you want to go out for dinner, you don't need to go to Australia. You go down the street to the local restaurant. You want to go fishing in the neighborhood? There are plenty of places a lot closer than faraway places. If you're a graduate student studying languages, maybe you come here because you've heard they got over 200 different languages on one little planet. Isn't that ridiculous? You want to study characteristics of humanoids. Hey, how come there's so many different skin colors on this planet? Maybe it was a penal colony, you know? There's Frank, Dr. Tartar, smart people. Dr. Tartar suggested a few years back that there might be somebody as close as 1,000 light years. And when we make contact with them, it'll be one of man's great moments, and maybe they'll help us solve our problems. And I'm sitting here thinking, hey, out there, we got a few problems. Can you help us? The signal takes 1,000 years to get out. Response, 1,000 years to get back, so 2,000 years. Hey, what can we do for you guys? Does that make any sense at all? Not to me it doesn't, anyway. There's Dr. Lord Rees. He publicly stated in 2012, only kooks see UFOs. Did he provide some data for that? You know, like a survey of large-scale scientific studies of UFOs, but of course he knows there is no large-scale scientific studies. There have been plenty of sightings by astronomers. Well, maybe he was right at that. Sorry. It's one of those dumb proclamations. I don't like proclamations. I like investigations. Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson, astrophysicist at the Hayden Planetarium. He's the one who had the brilliant idea that the proof that governments can cover things up is how much we know about President Clinton's genitalia. Good point, I guess. He's the one who said it would take 70,000 years to get to the nearest star. There's a big 11-inch clip, I guess, on YouTube in which he talks about eyewitness testimony and how terrible it is. He doesn't tell you the reason we can explain most UFO sightings is the eyewitnesses are good observers, not poor observers. We know it was Venus because that's where Venus was at that time. The witness described where he was looking, what angle above the horizon, what time it was. If it wasn't Venus, where the heck was Venus? People are good observers, lousy interpreters. Sometimes the journalists are at fault at that for asking the wrong questions. But he also asked a 10-year-old about telephone tag. You know, where you tell somebody a message and they pass it on to somebody else and they pass it on to somebody else privately, and you see what comes out the other end is very different from what it was to begin with. What in the world has that got to do with UFO observations? Where you can talk to the witness, where often you have multiple witnesses, where you have measurements, where you have physical traces, photographs, sounds, recordings. I talked to a Royal Canadian Mounted Police guy in Fredericton, New Brunswick, where I live. And I said, when you have a difficult case and you ask the public for help, do you get many responses? Oh yeah, people are very cooperative, they want to help. You know, bad crime, we need witnesses, whatever. And I said, what percentage of the responses that you get are useful? Oh, 3 or 4%, but that's how we solve most crimes. You gotta go look for the data you need. I'm interested in things nuclear. Most isotopes aren't fissionable. Should I say, well, we're never gonna build a reactor because the great majority of isotopes won't sustain a nuclear chain reaction? No, we say, hey, I'm building a reactor and using uranium-235. Now, it's difficult. You gotta enrich it. World War II, we built an enrichment facility at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. It's a mile long. It was using 5% of the electrical power produced in the United States to pump little uranium-235 molecules through an assembly, bunch of holes. The smaller molecules move faster. And at the end of the mile-long facility, it's enriched slightly, you put it back in and do it again and again. Oh, it's all done in secret. Most of the people running the machines didn't have any idea what they were concerned with. You look for the unique. You look for the special. You don't say, I don't know how to do it, so nobody else does. Look at the budgets of astronomy compared to the budgets of high technology. I mentioned earlier today. Nuclear airplanes, we were spending $100 million at GE in 1 year. Employed 3,500 people, of whom 1,100 were engineers and scientists. That's not a small group of professors and grad students. That's a lot of talent being harnessed. The stealth fighter cost $10 billion to develop. Governments can't keep secrets? Huh. our first spy satellite, the Corona spy satellite. There were 12 failures in secret in the late 50s. The 13th one worked, got more data about Soviet military installations than all the U-2 flights that had preceded it. Did we jump up and down and say, look how great we are? The program wasn't declassified until 1995. Governments can't keep secrets? Says who? The people who don't keep secrets. But they don't get security clearances. I had one for 14 years. I know a little bit about them. I have challenged him to a debate in a couple of articles I wrote, Dr. Tyson. It's clear he knows nothing about flying saucers, but so far he says he doesn't debate anybody. I can understand why. Well, if you open your mouth and say stupid things, you better expect somebody to challenge you. That badass is part of the picture that's on the internet. I didn't make up the line. There's Dr. Seth Shostak. He and I met we both got a free trip from England to the United States on the Queen Elizabeth II. We each attended the other guy's 3 lectures. In the course of mine, I talked about 5 large-scale scientific studies. I showed them earlier today. And after each one, I asked how many people here have read that. This was back a number of years ago. He didn't raise his hand after any. We did a debate on coast-to-coast radio. That reaches down here in this part of the world, doesn't it? George Noory, who was the guy before Noory? Art Bell. I won the debate. 57, 33, 10% who said, I don't know who won. And after that, I contacted him and said, how about if I send you my book, Flying Saucers and Science? Sure, why not? So he told me, gave me an address. And 6 months later, they were talking on, he appears on George Noory too. Somebody asked him about my book. He said, well, it's on my nightstand. He didn't say he'd read it. We don't dare to be contaminated by facts that we don't know, you know. Nice guy. He says the proof that the government can't keep secrets is what a bad job we did with FEMA and Katrina. And you say, what's that got to do with keeping secrets? He also says it's an example is how badly the post office works. Has he never heard of the NRO, the CIA, the DIA? That whole alphabet soup of agencies? I guess not. He expects everything to be published in the open scientific literature, of course. Had a guy tell me Roswell couldn't have happened because there had been an article in a physics journal within 2 months. Who's kidding who here? Can't keep secrets? We'll get into some specific ones maybe as we go here. Seth's a nice guy. Doesn't know a damn thing about flying saucers or government security or deep space travel. But why let the facts get in the way of a well-versed opinion? Here's a new book, Alien Universe, Extraterrestrial Life in Our Minds. Now, Dr. Lincoln has published over 500 papers, and I'm impressed with that as a physicist. Has a lot of output. He works at Fermilab up in Illinois, is involved with a big accelerator in Europe, CERN accelerator. And I talked earlier in the day about Marjorie Fisher's work with the Betty Hill star map. And he mentions our book, Captured. He said Marjorie built a model, walked around with the map that was published, and identified the stars in the map. She built more than 20 models. This took several years of work. She was eliminating stars because astronomers said they don't have planets or life or whatever. Years worth of work. And if he mentions the book captured, there's a whole chapter on the star map. How can he be so wrong as to say, oh, she built a model? A number of other equally. Oh, he says you can't keep secrets. With the internet age, you can't keep secrets. Any military men here? Who are willing to admit it? Okay. Would you agree that secrets can be kept? I think he shook his head yes. Loads of secrets being kept. All the time. Go to the archives. I get people telling me all classified information is released after 25 years. Balderdash. I can prove it easily by finding lots of classified stuff. You can't look at it, but you know that it's there because it's withdrawn from the stuff you're looking at. There's a lot of stuff a lot older than 25 years that hasn't been declassified. It's just came out a couple of months ago, I guess. I will give him credit for this. I wrote him a fairly strong email, and I got a polite response back. And it was kind of funny. I said, give me a good mailing address, and I'll send you my book, Flying Saucers and Science, and Top Secret Magic. Well, it would be inappropriate for me to have you send me those books. I went out and I bought them on Amazon or someplace like that. So I thanked him for saving me the expense. I didn't say, I hope you'll get a chance to read them. You've all heard of Bishop Ussher. He's the one who said in 1643 that he went through the Bible and all the begats, sort of a sexy look at the Bible, and he concluded that the world was created in 4004 BC. I think he said it Thursday afternoon, but I'm not sure of that. 10 billion years is a better number, as opposed to 6,000 years ago. Nothing to UFOs, the astronomers will tell you. Somebody told me an argument he got today that it's very unlikely they could find us. How do you judge that? Do you do a survey of 1,000 stars and say, how many of you guys have looked for us? How many have found us? How do you do this, of course? I have no idea, but I mean, it's one of those research by proclamation doesn't impress me. Give me research by investigation. One of the things you'll find is how we were much more ignorant a little while back than we are now. We got a long way to go before there aren't still areas of ignorance, though. Biggest study for the Air Force, 3,200 cases, the congressional testimony of 12 scientists, University of Colorado study, spent $500,000. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, Air Force consultant for 20 years. It's amazing how many of the astronomers don't refer to Allen's work, even though he was on the inside for 20 years. And he was chairman of the astronomy department at Northwestern University. We don't talk about anybody who knows something about what's going on. This is a crummy joke, but you've all heard it. Might as well look at it anyway. We have a police officer asking the guy who's crawling around on the ground under the streetlight, "What are you doing down there?" "Well, I'm looking for my keys, officer." "Where'd you drop them?" "Well, over near the car over there." "Well, why are you looking here? There's more light here." That is funny if you think about it for a while. I've gone over this. Only people who haven't kept secrets will tell you that secrets can't be kept. Amazing. Manhattan Project. Some people say $10 billion, it doesn't matter. It's a big number to develop atomic bombs. Done in secret. Do you know that President Truman didn't know that that money had been spent while he was Vice President of the United States? It was only after President Roosevelt died that the Secretary of War had to brief him on the fact that we had spent all this money to build atomic bombs, which we probably were going to drop. Secrets can't be kept. He was only Vice President and had been a senator before that. So should have known about any money spent by Congress. He didn't. Secrets can be kept. The first H-bomb, incidentally, I'm still impressed. The fireball was 3 miles wide. That was in 1952. Released the energy of 10 million tons of TNT. One lousy bomb. I know you can say all bombs are lousy, but sometimes we can push it a lot farther out than that. The stealth aircraft, $10 billion in 10 years, in secret, Lockheed. Thousands of people involved. You see headlines about it in the paper? No. I talked earlier today about the Majestic 12 group. And I've had people say, well, surely those people would all have told their wives what they were doing. No way. I never told my wife anything classified. It would be a stupid thing to do. I can't control what she says, inadvertently or whatever. Secrets can be kept. That's a wicked-looking aircraft, isn't it? There's the Corona Spy satellite that I mentioned. Well, they didn't keep it forever. Of course, the technology changed a little between 1960 and 1995. You can get, without much trouble from the CIA, dozens of top secret Umbra CIA UFO documents, and that's what they look like up there. I think you can read 8 words on this page. This is a top secret Umbra National Security Agency UFO document. Back in the early 80s, we had Freedom of Information Act suits against them, and they finally decided they'd release this stuff. Well, they told us about it, but they can't release it. Sources and methods information cannot be distributed. President Clinton signed a new executive order, and they said, we'll release them. I have 156 pages that look just like that. You could read 1 sentence per page. And people were telling me, oh, Stan, they're not holding back anymore. I said, oh, can you read what's under the whiteout? Well, no, but they're not withholding it anymore. Well, since we can't read it, and I found out, it sounds crazy. I called the NSA, I'd heard that they were releasing more data. And she asked my name to get my address to send me the latest stuff. Oh, I know who you are. Oh, that was kind of a surprise. Oh yes, Mr. Class, the nasty, noisy negativist, told us that you show the blacked out versions of the documents and don't tell anybody that it's sources and methods information that's being withheld. So they thought it would have less of an impact than my showing blacked out documents you see on television. They think we're idiots. I don't think we are. NSA, that's no such agency, never says anything. But you've all heard of Mr. Snowden now, and he's listening as we speak, the NSA is. a very important statement was made. We didn't find out until years later, but back after the University of Colorado study said, oh, close Project Blue Book, it's not doing anything useful, and I tend to agree with them. So an Air Force general, Carol Bolliger, was asked, what should we do about Project Blue Book? He was an engineer, worked on the space program, the Lunar Excursion Module, had no previous connection with Project Blue Book, so he wrote a memo, as a result of which Project Blue Book was closed. This was in October '69. And in the memo he said, reports of UFOs which could affect national security are made in accordance with JNAP 146, Air Force Manual 55-11, and are not part of the Blue Book system. That's an astonishing statement because we'd always been told that Blue Book was in. If there's a UFO sighting, the only government group that's going to investigate it is Project Blue Book. 2 paragraphs later, he says, if we close Project Blue Book, the public won't have a place to report sightings. However, as previously noted, reports which could affect national security will continue to be investigated using the procedures designed for that purpose. Again, an extraordinary claim. Well, I didn't hear about this until 10 years later, but I managed to locate General Bollinger. He's dead now, unfortunately, but explained, I had a clearance for 14 years. I read his memo with great interest. I said, it sounds to me like you're saying there were 2 separate channels of communication about UFO sightings for the government. One for reports which could affect national security. And I gave an example. I say, suppose a UFO goes down the runway at a Strategic Air Command base where nuclear weapons are stored. That's by definition the national security problem. And the other is if people go outside, look up, and there's a darn flying saucer, well, no big deal. And he said, yes, 2 separate channels. I have yet to see any major news media pay attention to this very simple fact of life. The good stuff went that way, the normal stuff went this way. Anybody says we're not being lied to? Look for radio signals, because they're operating at the level of Marconi. I live in Canada. We take great pride that the first long-distance radio communication was Marconi's to Newfoundland. You can go see the place where the signal was received. Even though all the scientists told Marconi, how can you talk about radio signals crossing the ocean? Don't you know that radio signals travel in straight lines and that the Earth is round? Not flat, round. Well, Marconi knew that, but he'd already run experiments of ships going further and further out and still picking up signals. We didn't know the reason why that worked until 20 years later. We discovered the ionosphere. Oh, the signals bounce off the ionosphere. We didn't even know it was there. Marconi was sharp. He found something that worked. He didn't know why it worked, it didn't matter. Oh, history. Magellan's ship set the record for going around the ocean. In 1523, it took 3 years to circumnavigate the globe. Jules Verne said 80 days. The space station goes around every 90 minutes. That's a pretty good progression from 3 years to 90 minutes. But the space station is not just a faster sailboat. Entirely new technology. Costs a lot of money. It works. Not many people use slide rules anymore. For those of you who don't know, what's on the left is part of a slide rule. most of you have, what, $4.95 calculators that can do everything as I did a lot faster and better and so forth. If you're willing to spend the money on building little chips, think about it. If I gave my digital wristwatch to the smartest people on the planet in the 1930s, they know it kept time because there's a dial on it. They know it's electric because there's a battery in it. Could they have built another one, analyzed the chip, and build another chip? Not the slightest chance. Intel spends $1 billion on a chip factory. Nuclear rocket, nuclear rocket. So, time came out pretty close to what it's supposed to come out. Let me summarize by saying, we need to use what we have learned about how our views about things change to understand that we need to take a new look at the cosmos. We need to get rid of the arrogance coupled with the ignorance. We need to look for facts, data, evidence, not opinions from bright people. There's a book out, Kathleen Martin and I did at Betty Hill's niece. Science Was Wrong. There are 14 chapters. We each did 7. It's time for another 14. Each one stimulated by some smart person saying something stupid about what was impossible. There's a long history here. You'd think we could learn from that. I hope our children and grandchildren and my great-grandchild will learn that there's a lot more out there than we know now. Thank you very much for listening.